Hi, this is number two in a wee series of video blogs thinking about faith and politics. And yesterday, at the end, I thought maybe we'd have a look at truth, what we mean by truth today. And well, events of yesterday kind of reared their heads to show that well, it's quite prescient to do something along those lines. I'm hoping this is working okay. I'm doing this a bit later than I did yesterday, which means that kids are in the house. And although I'm trying to stop them from streaming Netflix all in different places, the internet connection is struggling for speed. So we'll see how we do. So, truth. 2016, the Oxford Dictionary declared post-truth as its word of the year. And it says in the description of that that it reflects what it called so the Oxford Dictionary, what they were calling a highly charged political 12 months. It is the word, post-truth, is defined as an adjective relating to circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than emotional appeals. So kind of what is about facts is less important than what triggers your heart, a gut reaction to something. So if you think back to last year, if you're in the UK anyway, there was a whole lot of talk about a big red bus that was a big red bus, there it is, that was doing the rounds around the country, which had this message on it saying we send the EU £350 million a week. So it's a very clear message, a clear description of something that's taking place, but it was a quite challenging and deeply, well, one would really say it was a distorted truth that was on the side of it. Now, whether you go as far as to say it's a lie or not, well, it depends on what was made of it. So when you take into account the rebate the UK receives, how much money immediately comes back when you're supporting, thinking of subsidies for farmers, for research, universities, all that kind of thing, the actual figure for what the UK sends to Europe averages out about 160 million. So nearly 200 million less than what it said on that. So there's still a connection to the truth. Because the 350 is roughly what the gross contribution would be, but it's nothing like what the actual contribution is. So it is at the best deeply misleading. So in some sense it's more akin, what was on that bus is a good example of a typical political lie. There's some connection to the truth, but it is really distorted. But since then, we've had alternative facts introduced to the world by Kellyanne Conway, who's one of Donald Trump's counselors in the White House. And she was explaining away one of her colleagues, Sean Spicer, who was basically lying about the numbers of people who had been attending Donald Trump's inauguration. So this all just took place in the first few days of the Trump presidency. And then yesterday, a bit like a gift from God for what I was planning to talk about today, Donald Trump gave a press conference that sent heads completely spinning. So that took place just yesterday. Now, there's a real danger in doing any kind of podcast thing like this, that events just take over and the politics are going so fast at the moment that something you say one day seems completely out of date a following day. So in some ways I'm wanting to take a step back from the kind of specifics to think about the general picture of what has been going on. But there was well, in fact, I should say, if you haven't seen that press conference, then you'll be able to find it on YouTube. Go and watch it. It is amazing. But watch it with try and find a website that unpacks some of the facts of what's happening, so that you can kind of tally what's being said with objective truth, with reality on the other hand. So I'm going to pick up one example from the press conference yesterday, just because it is such a clear example and a simple one. Almost immediately, Trump and a kind of connection to objective facts just fell apart when he claimed that he had won by 306 electoral college votes, saying that it was, and they did add in the wee little kind of catch-all. I think he said something like he guessed or something like that it was the biggest win since Ronald Reagan. Now, you got to keep in mind that was completely unsolicited. No one asked him about the electoral college results. He just offered this nugget of information himself to everyone gathered, and in fact, he made a point that he was speaking to the American people, speaking to the world. He's speaking to us directly. He wants to bypass the press. That he was doing it in their presence, but he was trying to direct communication with us. So he then said, well, let's break it down for a start. It is completely, I mean, not even slightly wrong. It's completely wrong that even the number that he gave was wrong in the 306, because he actually won by 304 electoral college votes. So okay, you can imagine that you could easily make that slip up, only he talks about it all the time, so how you can make that difference, I don't know. But more importantly than that, in the previous election cycles, Obama received more electoral college votes, 365, 332. Clinton did 370 and 379 in his elections, and George H.W. Bush got 426. So apart from George W. Bush, who he did get more electoral college votes from, it's smaller than all the others, but he'd said that he had got more than anyone since Reagan. So it's just, I mean, it's completely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. So later in the press conference, this was pointed out by a journalist, and Trump's response was amazing. He blamed the data that he'd been given. Now, bearing in mind he's the president, and so can ask for for the best data of anything that anyone else can get their hands on. And then he said something like, "Oh, I'd seen it somewhere else," or something like that. So you kind of think, well, maybe it's a small thing, and it's a bit in the vein of what Trump has said about his buildings, because there is this whole, he always, I mean, it's really funny if it wasn't so dangerous now, but in the past, he talks about the number of floors on his buildings, and he exaggerates the number of floors. So he'll say that Trump Tower has 68 stories. It only has 58. And this is the same for numerous other buildings that he owns. He exaggerates the number of floors that there are on them, so they appear that they're bigger buildings than they really are. Amazing. So it seems like it's a small thing, but this little incident really highlights something that is going on in this post-truth world. For Trump, it must feel like it was a huge, massive victory that he had. And so he keeps on telling us that it was, even if the facts don't make sense. And he is the president, right? So I don't know why he keeps going on about it. Indeed, if you look, JFK and Harry Truman got only 303 electoral college votes. So he's one above them, and they're hardly presidents that you forget about. So it's an innocuous example, it seems like, but it's an example that illustrates a general pattern that is going on. So this is before we even get into all the nonsense about the resignation of Michael Flynn and the possible connections between Trump and Russia. I'm not going there. So you might say, and lots of people say, all politicians lie. And to a degree, that is true. The irony there. but it's not in the same way and not to the same extent as what we're seeing here. So the difference, as far as I can see it, the difference is that Trump and his staff are disconnecting themselves from the kind of traditional way politicians lie. So the traditional way politicians lie is that they have kind of one foot in the truth, and then they're reaching beyond what the truth is in order to kind of distort the public's understanding. And so the big red bus, the Brexit bus, is a perfect example of that. There was a smidgen of truth there, but it was so distorted that the effect ultimately was a lie, but the defense was always available, that you can say, but it is based on this true number. The gross figure in this case is true. So there's that connection to the truth. Now, what Trump and his staff are doing is wholly different to that. There is no connection to the truth. It is, in that sense, it's just pure propaganda. And then often Trump adds the exclamation point, "Believe me," for added emphasis when he's told something that is demonstrably untrue. So, okay, so that's an example there. Now, don't make any mistake about it. This kind of general trend towards getting people to give up on the truth as being kind of irrelevant and to go instead with gut feelings, it's a strategy. It's one that Putin has successfully deployed in Russia, and it is, in that sense, it's a path to a kind of autocracy or kleptocracy, with the people who have kind of given up on any ability to know what is true any longer, just kind of meekly following. And in that sense, it is very Orwellian, if you've ever read 1984 or read some of George Orwell's other writings. And we've seen it before, and you can read about it in the writings of folks like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pastor in Germany. He ended up being killed by the Nazi state right near the end of the Second World War. And he talks about the kind of how easy it is for a spirit of cynicism towards the truth to allow horrendous things kind of permission to, like, open the door for terrible, terrible things to happen. So objective truth and objective reality is really important to maintain. And the reason it's important is that when you're talking about making policy decisions in a functioning democracy, when our elected representatives are making decisions on our behalf, what they're doing is with the same shared basis in reality. So in a sense, in a church language, we're singing from the same hymn sheet. We need to be operating with the same coherent set of facts from which we can then choose what the best path is to take collectively. And we kind of give permission to our elected representatives to do that on our behalf, but on the understanding that we're in this kind of together. So in light of what we've seen, kind of post-truth, alternative facts, and this kind of movement away from reporting on true kind of things that are happening to this propaganda, Garry Kasparov, who's the chess grandmaster, but also somebody who's been really critical of what's been going on in Russia, tweeted this: "The point of modern propaganda isn't only to misinform or push an agenda, it is to exhaust your critical thinking, to annihilate truth." So that's somebody speaking with real experience of from his own home country of seeing this happen. Now, if you've got access to iPlayer, the BBC iPlayer, I really recommend watching Adam Curtis's documentary that's called Hyper-Normalization. It was released at the end of, I think it was October of last year, and it's really long. It's nearly 3 hours long, I think it is, but it's really worth watching to grasp some of the bigger picture of how the world has got to be in the place where we are, where so much that we take for being normal about the way the world is actually far from normal. It is really shaped by propaganda. And with Donald Trump, we are seeing that so blatantly exposed that the whole edifice is now kind of teetering. It's kind of like the curtain being pulled aside on the Wizard of Oz to reveal what is going on. All right, so that's maybe a little of when we're thinking about truth, what's going on in politics at the moment over the past year, and some of the rapid changes we've seen, thinking about post-truth, about alternative facts, and about this cynicism about the reporting of facts that is, I mean, it was relentlessly pushed by Trump yesterday in the press conference, is that we shouldn't trust the journalists, we shouldn't trust the press, we shouldn't trust anything they say, and that's why he is wanting to speak directly to the people. Now, so what about the kind of faith part in all of this? So what does it mean for us to have leaders that are so blatantly dishonest? And how is it possible that millions of faithful people could have voted for a compulsive liar and think that that was entirely okay? And of course, you've got to bear in mind that there have also in the last few weeks been extraordinary scenes of millions of people protesting across the world to reveal, that folks do see it. They understand what is going on here. Even here in Aberdeen in Scotland, there have been 2 different events over the past few weeks where people have gathered together to both to protest and to talk about living together in community in a different way, where we're seeing each other as brothers and sisters rather than as kind of opponents to fight against. Well, there is a really long tradition in the Bible of prophets speaking truth to power, calling out the powerful for what they were doing, and often ending up in a really sticky wicket as a result of doing that. So there's always this temptation to kind of follow the big man. That's kind of an African expression of the big man leader, the one who, by kind of force of will, is going to make things right. But that is, and that's certainly what you're kind of seeing in the likes of Donald Trump. Is during the campaign, he was always talking about he was the only person who could make things right, make America great again, and all those those slogans. But that is completely opposed to what Jesus spoke about, or what he modeled in his own life, which was focused on what was right with God. So kind of making your life right with God, not what felt right in your own guts, your own gut feeling. Now there's a couple of different examples where you kind of see that playing out, and one of them is kind of near the end of his life. It's actually just before he's going to get arrested, when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, which is this garden that's outside Jerusalem. And he'd gone there one night just to pray and to kind of think about what was going to be happening. And as he does so, he's asking these questions about, because he knows what's probably going to happen. He's going to be arrested. There's probably death is only a few days away. And he ponders, can I give this up? Do I have to follow this path all of the way? And he comes to the conclusion that, if for his life to be true, for all he said to be true, the way he's lived his life to be true, he has to follow this to its natural consequence, even if that means the cross and crucifixion a few days away from that. So then after that, he is arrested. And there is this amazing scene in John's story of Jesus' life, when so he's been arrested and he's kind of been bounced from place to place because everyone's a little bit concerned. They want to get rid of him, but they're a bit concerned about being the ones that are to blame for getting rid of him. And he ends up in the Roman consuls, the kind of Roman leaders' offices. And in there, he's asked by Pontius Pilate about himself. And Pilate says to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answers, says, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" And Pilate says, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" And Jesus says, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews, the kind of power play, kind of violence and all that sort of thing. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born." So he then goes on to clarify why he is really here. And he says, "For this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." In other words, hears, kind of relates, understands what Jesus is saying. And then Pilate, and this is just genius, Pilate asks him, "What is truth?" And that is a famous line from John's Gospel. What is truth? So the Roman leader, the powerful Roman authority within Jerusalem and that whole area, a typical politician and disconnected, not even sure any longer what truth means. And that's 2,000 years ago. So within so in there, you've got Jesus explaining, look, if you want to know what truth is, look at the way I've been living my life. Look at what I've been telling you. Look at what I've been saying, because this is what truth is about us, about who we are, the kind of people we are, about the sort of communities that we should be building. This is what it is about. For this I was born, to testify to the truth. Now, some Christians, especially in conservative circles, have been completely sidetracked by issues like abortion or LGBTQ rights, and they found themselves just completely lost in a siding off the main track, screaming and shouting, but not going anywhere any longer. And so in some ways, Trump offered them a lifeline for that group of Christians, faithful people in the United States, by promising that he was going to appoint justices to the Supreme Court who would overturn legislation that allowed for abortion or that gave equality to folks in the LGBTQ community. So that kind of gave them, this is our guy. But it kind of, they're so caught in this social kind of trap of thinking about these two in particular social issues so much that they've lost the bigger picture of what Jesus was talking about, completely lost what he was talking about in a truthful life, in a life that is lived out for others. Now, if we go back a little bit, in John's story about Jesus' life, Jesus speaking to his disciples, his friends, and he says to them, "I give you a new commandment." And this is all happening again right before he's going to be arrested. He says, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So now, Christianity is not unique in any way, and there are many faiths that have this understanding of love for your neighbor, of kind of treating your neighbor as you would want to be treated yourself, this kind of golden rule as part of their overall ethic about how you are to live, about what a kind of truthful life is. And here we have Jesus giving a really clear example of that. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, when you think about kind of yourself, or you actually start thinking about living together with other people and thinking about laws that you make that try to help you live in community with other people, how does this principle of love for one another actually play itself out? Well, later on, this is going then now, 20 years kind of later we have Paul, the Apostle Paul, writing in a letter that's called Romans, and he writes this. There's a crossover here. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and all the other commandments are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. And then he clarifies what that means. And he says, love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. So Jesus himself warned against people who would use the cloak of his name and would say, but I'm a Christian, I'm a faithful person, and then would do terrible things. And we've seen that throughout history, that taking place. So here we've got, when you actually look at what's being said here, this always this check on what is in your mind, what is in your heart, against that simple rule. Does what I am about to say or what I am about to do have an impact on my neighbor? And is that impact negative or positive? And it really is that simple. It's about who we are as people. It's about what motivates us, about what gives us that gut feeling, because ideally where we want to be is a place where that gut feeling that we have is not a gut feeling about selfishness and always about looking out for number one, but is a gut feeling that is looking out for our neighbor, looking out for each other. If we all do that, if that is the way that the whole community works, then we're always striving for the best for each other. And that's how yesterday, when I was talking about how things, when something is not a zero-sum game, when it can raise up together, that's how it works. When everyone is trying to do something to support one another, rather than a few trying to take everything at the expense of the others. So how much is our life, what we're making, the decisions we make, the approaches we take, the leaders that we look to, shaped by that sense of how are they looking at the world? Are they looking at the world the same way we are? Are they looking at a reality, objective facts, the same way that we are? And are they applying this kind of rule? And this is where the faith part comes into it, about evaluating the good in social policy decisions in light of who our neighbors are, and do these decisions do harm to our neighbors, or do they do good to our neighbors? So of course the next question is, who is our neighbor? But that is for another time. Anyway, a few thoughts on truth and the importance of truth, and how faith can impact and help shape how we understand truth, and how that plays itself out within a community, and how we relate to one another there. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch up with you another time. Cheers now. Bye.